Hello. This is the second diary where I will try to organize ideas and maintain the flow of the development of Kamen Rider 01's. I strongly recommend watching the first one before in order to clearly see the evolution that is taking place. With that issue settled, these are the animations that have been made so far. As you can see, technically the only animations missing are the ones for receiving damage, the attacks, and some specific things. I'm not counting the covers or the crazy things I want to add later. But in principle it's a good guide. That means that right now all the pure movement actions are covered. Of course, as I pointed out in the first video, there are many animations that simply did not convince me after being finished for one reason or another. The walking animation part is still just as valid. Furthermore, I must now point out that neither the jump nor the air dodge leave me satisfied. I feel that the jump turned out a bit bad, and the air dodge is good, but at the speed at which it needs to be drawn in-game, it just doesn't look right. In fact, I also thought about adding a couple of extra frames to the parry animation, so that it fits better into the game. As for the roll, I have my things. I really love the effect of the trail, but it should be noted that when there is little or no movement, well, I suppose I can solve the roll thing by adding something in the empty frames it has in the middle. I must mention that between the previous diary and this one, I made a change to the color palette. I really like it, but I still think I'll have to make one more update just to make the alternate suits work properly. The same reason I paint the head in weird colors. But finally, let's get to the fun part, the attacks. Remembering what was seen in the series, 01 is a fast fighter who generally tries to gain an advantage by dodging attacks and overwhelming the enemy until they are in a precarious situation, and then land his most devastating attacks, without apparently having a great limitation to use all his strength from the beginning, at least in his base forms. Yes, you know you're making that kind of character when you see that his hardened metal form still wins fights by surpassing his rivals in speed sometimes. In summary, his attacks should be rather weak, but he should have the capabilities to move around, bring the fight to his area of convenience, and keep the enemy under constant punishment. What in fighting game jargon is called a rushdown character. For this case, I should consider that to work I have access to his sword, and his transformations to complement the moveset. But his main focus, like the most riders, is hand-to-hand combat. Just as a note, I should try to avoid using the abilities of his power-ups, or abilities that don't correspond to 01. But there are a couple of moves that are practically guaranteed. On the one hand, I should give him a dash with a trail effect. In addition to this, in addition to the rider kick, which is the signature move of any rider. However, beyond the fact that they should have very different properties, these are movements that would be uncomfortable to put on an input other than the special lateral. At least the dash should be accessible in both ground and air conditions, but the kick should generally only be an aerial move. That is, I have to find a way to define which attack will be executed, without being too invasive. However, since the dash is a recurring move and the kick is a finisher, at the moment I consider the most appropriate thing is that by default the input serves for the dash, but that in a special circumstance instead of the dash the rider kick is activated. Another series of movements I'm unsure about are the strong or smash attacks, depending on whether or not you want to infringe on Nintendo's copyrights. In summary, I think this series of movements is ideal to take advantage of his sword attacks. In fact, I see it as ideal to take advantage of the key movements for this. But there's a small problem, and it's this guy. Precisely, because 01 himself only used a couple of the attaché caliber's attacks. But this gentleman? As a note and possible spoiler, He started an apocalyptic event because his parents didn't give him a toy when he was a child, but took advantage of each and every one of Zero One's sword's attacks, thanks to basically being able to steal them from him, while Zero One could theoretically access those movements. We only saw them used by Thouser, so I'm in doubt about giving them to Zero Ones, especially knowing that Zero One only used a couple, leaving me with few options. And well, while the transformations are still there, I'd prefer to use them for his specials, just to give them the importance they deserve, even if I don't use the actual transformation mechanic. The specific way to use them, I have an idea, but I still prefer to think clearly before saying anything. Likewise, for this I'm grateful that the Zero One forms still follow the classic scheme, where more or less all of them have a clear established function. So the difficult part will be putting it all together in the moveset. Anyway, before that I must focus on making a good set of basic movements. Like any good fighter, he should be able to handle himself well with punches and kicks, especially with his aerial ones. I mean, his introduction is a jump to the sky, turns to a rider kick. That is, I have to make sure that his way of winning is to take the enemy into the air to be able to finish them off with his star attack. But for now I think I've clarified more or less everything I wanted to talk about this time. I really like how the development is progressing, and I'm starting to get excited thinking about what else I can add to make it as enjoyable as possible. But in any case, good evening to everyone.